First step in removing the engine for your Hemi 5.7 is you want to remove the air box, air cleaner, the easy stuff. Then you want to remove your coil packs, disconnect your wiring harness, coil packs, wiring harness on that side as well. Next you want to move your wiring harness out of the way, disconnect it. After you disconnect it, just move it off to the side. You'll do the same thing for the other side. After you do that, you want to disconnect your fuel line here. Be careful when doing that because there is fuel pressure on it sometimes, and you don't want that to squirt up in your face. Next you want to remove the drive belt. This harness here is connected to the lower alternator. I'll get that when I pick the car up. So you'll remove the drive belt, then you'll come over here and you'll take the power steering pump off and just sit it off to the side there. After you remove the power steering pump, like I said, you want to sit that off to the side. Next you'll disconnect your upper radiator hose, and then we'll go down and we'll take the alternator off to get to the rest of the wiring connections. Before you take this hose loose, I would advise, if you haven't already, to drain the radiator. That way you won't get antifreeze all over the place. Also, you can reuse the antifreeze if it's not contaminated, and that'll save you some money on this job. Disconnect that stuff. You want to take the bolts out of the intake manifold and lift this piece up off the way. We'll take this intake manifold and take it up out of the way. And you will find a pipe connection in the back. Turn that around. There's a hose in the back. You can simply pull that off. Pliers or something to get to that hose connection there. That's on the back of the intake manifold. Just disconnect that, then you can move the whole unit off. After you remove the intake manifold, as you'll see, you'll have access to the valley of the motor. Now, this is where you're going to hook your chain up for removal. You don't want to hook it to that plastic intake manifold piece because, like I said, it's plastic and it will definitely mess up. This is just foam here in the middle. There's a cushion, take that out. You'll notice this particular vehicle has 4 NOx sensors on there. If you've ever had any issues with your NOx sensors, codes, or anything like that, you can go ahead and replace that while this thing is broken down. It's pretty easy to get to with intake manifold off. You will have access, so that you'll be able to get the motor out, you need to remove the stabilizer bar. 2 13mm bolts on both sides. Take that out, then you can pull this whole bar up. You will need to remove the plastic tabs here. There's one there, there's one there, there's one there. Take those out and this piece will lift up, and as you can see, that bar will slide right out of there. With the vehicle in the air, you're going to remove your bell housing bolts. There's a stabilizer brace on the front of this one. This is at the bottom of the transmission. I've already unloosened these, but also you will disconnect your starter by removing these 3 bolts. Starter will fall forward. You can just let that fall off to the side. That's not really going to be in your way per se. If you think it is going to cause you issue, go ahead and disconnect the wiring connections on the side there. And then you can just pull that starter out the way and move it out your way whenever you're pulling the engine. With the car in the air, first thing you want to do is go ahead and drain the oil out of the oil pan. This can help you in many ways because if you notice any contaminants in the oil, that'll kind of give you an idea of what type of engine failure you have, or what the cause of it is. For example, if this oil comes out and at the end I see a bunch of water, then that's going to let me know I've got a head gasket failure or an internal leak somewhere. So when I take the engine apart, I'll be looking for those items. In this case, I'm looking to see if there's any metal or anything like that that comes out of this oil. If it does, then I'll know that I've got to clean it out before I put it back together extensively to get all the metal flake out. So that you have space, go ahead and remove the lower front shroud. That way you'll have better access to the front bolts that you're going to remove on like the AC compressor, your AC compressor on this side, and your alternator on the other side. Now that the lower pan, the front shroud is removed, you have easy access to the lower bolts on your alternator on the passenger side. If you move over to the right side, you'll see you have very easy access to your air conditioner bolts. You'll remove that, you'll pull your AC compressor away, and just let it sit off to the side. No need to unhook your hoses, because then you'd have to then you would lose all your Freon. You don't want to do that. You disconnected the alternator and the other things you need to disconnect in the front. Now would be a good time to go ahead and disconnect your Cadillac converters. You can do this by removing the nuts on the studs up here at the top. There's two on each Cadillac converter. I like to spray them down and let them sit for, golly, at least a good 20-30 minutes with some PB Blaster to break up any rust. You do not want to break those studs, because that will make the job a whole lot harder. In the rear here, you want to disconnect this clamp here and disconnect this clamp here. Then once you lower that, you'll slide this pipe forward and slide it out. After you remove the lower exhaust pipes, the Cadillac converter, you'll have better access to the transmission, where you can remove the upper transmission mounting bolts. Also, there's some wiring harnesses here you need to release on this side as well as in the front. Come over on the other side, you want to go ahead and disconnect your fluid lines and your wiring connectors. Alright, on this particular job, this engine is locked up. Normally, you'd be able to spin the torque converter around and remove the torque converter bolts. Okay. Get in there. You remove those bolts there. Those are for the torque converter. But since this engine is locked up, you can't turn it. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the transmission. We're going to take away the mounting, the transmission mount, as well as disconnect the drive shaft. Then we're going to slide the transmission back, and what that'll do is pull the torque converter and transmission apart safely. And since we'll be using lifts and stuff like that, we can safely pull this transmission back and disconnect it from the torque converter. Then we'll proceed with pulling the engine out of the car. After the transmission is removed, you have clear access to the back side of the motor, and you can disconnect the rest of your wiring harnesses and then go ahead and connect your chains for your hoist once you lower the vehicle down. The only other thing that you will need to disconnect while the vehicle's in the air are the motor mount bolts, which are here and here. And then you go on the other side, and there's one there, and there's one on the back side of that. That's the only thing that holds the motor down into the car after you have the transmission taken out of the way. Okay, now that we have everything loose, there's a few final things you need to do to get this alternator out. Of course, you've removed your alternator down there, and you've taken the wiring harness, and you just want to sit that wiring harness to the side. You want to sit this other wiring harness on this side out the way. You've got your AC compressor undone. You pull it off to the side, as well as your power steering pump, pull it off to the side. Now, as you can see, these are free. Now the motor, when it comes out, it's going to come up. It's going to come forward and up. So we also take out the radiator fan If you're not real comfortable, you might want to go ahead and take your radiator out also, so that you don't damage it. But and after that, you want to make sure you disconnect these two hoses at the back. This is the top of the motor here, and this is actually where you're going to hook your lifting chain so that you can lift the motor. Okay, now that we're pulling the motor out, finally we've got everything disconnected. You got it hooked up with a harness. If you don't have the special adapter, you can use some chains, go around the motor mount, as you see here, and lift it on up like that. Your standard engine hoist. You kind of want to lift it up at a little bit of an angle. Also, before you lift it up, you want to remove the O2 sensor that goes here. I found that when I was trying to pull that out, that O2 sensor kept jamming on this hose, and it was causing a problem. So, and to make the job a little bit easier, you can remove this hood here, this cowl here, but as long as you just unfasten it at all the little holes, and it'll lift up out of the way. So that's your engine coming up out of the car. Once we get it all the way out, we'll mount it to an engine stand, and then we'll break it down for rebuild. Pull it out, just simply use a engine hoist. Some people will call this a cherry picker. One thing whenever you're doing this, I suggest that you do not put your arms or any body parts up under that motor. You know, I'm using seat belts and chains and shit, and if one of them should break and you had your arm or something under there, then that could be, you know, very bad for you. So you always observe, you know, some type of safety rules when you're doing this job, because it's heavy and you don't want to get hurt. And you pretty much defeat your purpose, because it costs a whole lot more to fix your body than it does to fix the daggone car. This is the car after you have the engine out and up. You'll notice the wiring harness stays attached to the car, as well as the hoses and pipes. There's your power steering pump, AC compressor, as well as your hoses over there. It's pretty simple once you get it up and out. You just have to remember to disconnect everything. I like to double and triple check before I even start pulling the parts out, because if you don't, then sometimes you can end up with something hooked up and it'll cause a great problem. You know, for whatever it's worth, you really don't want to break any wires or damage them. You know, that could cause all type of problems that you have to contend with later.